It's been a while since we've done an episode of the Power 10, and there's good reason for that. Half the teams in the top 5 decided they just weren't going to play in anything until ESL Pro League, so here we are, finally, with some actual metrics, some actual data, something to judge these teams on once again. Let's get right into this. This is the Power 10. We're starting at the bottom, with the teams who have missed this edition who were previously on here. Virtus Pro, Heroic, and Gamer Legion, all of whom fell off. I think we're finally reaching the point where we actually know what the new teams are going to play like. These three teams were the best at making the most of the opportunity. Everyone else was in chaos, in shambles, some still are, but at least their talent is now driving them back up the rankings, etc. But realistically, their time at the top was going to come to an end, and they still need a lot of time to develop into properly contending teams. I will be giving the first award of the show. It's going to be the Comeback Team Award. I know one of these teams is going to be back in the top 10 relatively quickly, and I think it's going to be Gamer Legion. If I had to make a bet on any of these three to actually be a legitimate top 10 level roster, it is them. They have strong riflers, great leadership, and parts of their game still yet to fully develop and express themselves. And as they do across this year, we're going to see they are actually legitimately threatening, if not superstar driven just yet. I'd be careful of Rez, and I'd especially be careful of that PR guy. A little monster, that kid. At number 10, it's Falcons. Congratulations! You won a coin flip with Gamer Legion to be here. Essentially, we came down to a tiebreaker. It's like, I don't really see these teams as massively different, but who had the more impressive victory at Pro League? Both went 2 and 3, and I had to concede it was Falcons. They beat Liquid, who actually ended up going into playoffs, but I still have a rather dogged and unfavorable assessment of Falcons relative to their expectations. Realistically, this event was a mess, and I'm not going to be the first, I won't be the last, to bring up the fact that their firepower is pretty much Nico and no one. There's not a whole lot to back him up here, and we see it almost as a perfect trend. There are a couple maps that are exceptions to this, but if Nico is positive, they can win a map. If Nico goes negative, they can't, which is just a strange spot to find yourself in after putting so much effort and so much investment into the last offseason. Whilst the Nico win condition certainly is potent, it's not been enough to make them a true contender, which has been their goal for a while, but is emphasized by his acquisition. Something startling that I found in the numbers is that Nico throws as many flashes per round as Dexter, tied for the second most in the team, despite also leading them in opening attempts. Add on to that their poor 5v4 and 4v5 win rates, it does kind of give the impression that this team is about as well constructed and well structured as the average pug. No one really has a clear idea, a clear vision of how they should be playing, how they're going to win the rounds, beyond maybe Nico figure it out for us, and it's starting to affect them really badly. They will probably be the first team to come off this top 10 if Gamer Legion are to make their re-entry, because how can you rely on anything on this roster if even Nico could have multiple Dust 2s where he's 4 and 15, yet the team continues to pick it? It makes no sense, and it's going to be ugly. At number 9, we have Liquid, who make top 8, which is an achievement considering they did come into this event as a team outside of the favourites group. They weren't a top 8 ranked team at this event, but they did make it through a 3-2 margin, but still plenty good enough. There are a few things, though, that are preventing them from realistically rising up these ranks, namely, really, I think their map pool, and of course, their blend of individuals. On the map front, they picked 3 different maps across the event. It didn't exactly convince me that they could play on all 3, let alone then coming to the maps they didn't pick but still had to play. Anubis, they were genuinely solid on, even if they did run into the eventual champions and get kind of knocked down a peg. Anubis is a map where heads-up CT play is essential, so their potent concoction of riflers was able to shine. This was the strongest map for their struggling Aussie, whose anchoring abilities were heat-tested and stayed resilient. Ancient was the complete opposite, and there were moments where Liquid looked absolutely lost, constantly getting caught by CT aggression or biting on T-fakes, and the reliable, ever-reliable star rifler in Nerts, he was just atypically flat here, and on the defensive end especially, got very little done towards that mid-area, which is usually something that's quite a good lock-on. Overall, it still feels like Liquid are being led down a road to their own destruction. Avoiding Mirage in favour of Train is a decision that I don't really believe will help them in the long run, as the former is a map that strong riflers can make work, even in the face of dodgy, maybe not so strict leadership. You can play looser, you can go off your own vibe, your own instinct, and when you have Naf, Twist, Nerts, and then a couple other players who have their moments, you can actually go and eke out wins on Mirage in a way that I don't think you could on a lot of other maps that they're willing to play. Before we get into number 8, I do have a question for you. Are you tired of looking like a noob in-game? Sick of having the same old crappy skins? Check out Skin Club via my link in the description for a 7% deposit bonus. For gamers 18 or older, Skin Club is a case opening service who run a provably fair opening algorithm to give you truly random outcomes. Skin Club's battles mode has been upgraded, adding new things like crazy, team, and share modes just to make every roll a little more intense and a little more fun. I played a battle or two and managed to win some pretty crazy skins and upgraded a group of them into a gorgeous MP9 hot rod. Perfect for some gold stickers. Skin Club accept a wide variety of payment methods from cards and PayPal to skins themselves, as well as a range of crypto coins. Remember to play responsibly using the self-care tools provided, and use my link in the description to get a 7% bonus. A big thank you to Skin Club for supporting my channel, but let's get back into the video. Our Nart Subscribers Award goes to 3D Max and MIBR. Wow, their utility stats look fantastic for this event, and you've got to give them credit. They have been watching the online tutorials. Unfortunately, they might want to stop doing that and spend a little more time in DM. Opening kills, multis, the firepower stats, lacking. Short of expectation. So I think these two teams definitely deserve it. They know what they're doing with their util. They're just not quite there in the fragging department. So, into number 8, where we have G2. Far below where they'd expect to be. And that's because something's not quite right on this team. They have talented players. MOUZ, arguably one of the best AWPers in the world. MOUZ MD, a really strong quality entry. Heavy got a player who, as a turret, as a rifler playing off the shoulder, as a rifler simply playing off space, could achieve so much last year. This is more than enough weapons to go and win games, yet they can't beat a top 10 team. I mean, if only there was some kind of role or position that could optimize and figure out how best to use pieces on a team. Anyway, guess there's nothing. Pro League saw G2 literally beat everyone they should have and lose to everyone they should have, as per this ranking. Still, it's a disappointing exit. MOUZ played like a man possessed by the spirit of, well, himself from last year. A return to form after a disappointing Katowice. The rest of the roster fell short of their fragging duties. Even MOUZ MD, my favourite little entry player, despite his solid overall rating, he was awful in their final defeat, and that kind of let it all down. Heavy God has been, well, just letting himself down, letting everyone down so far on G2, with this event being no exception. Despite however much Snacks and Taz are teaching him and how much Hunter's helping him understand things, or whatever it is he keeps saying in interviews, the reality is he's not showing that on the server. Now, Hunter and Snacks both suck as fraggers, that's nothing new, and both seem to be making up half the leadership on the roster, given the nebulous nature of who is actually calling on that CT side. So it makes them both especially shit if they're not going to kill anyone. They are technically leading this roster, and we're still in this mess. At number 7, I've placed FaZe, and that's because they're just very hard to place correctly right now. 7 could end up being an insult or a very flattering placement, depending on how Lisbon plays out. In their last outing, they were able to beat teams who actually are ahead of them on this ranking, yet also lose to teams that are below them. So you understand my trouble here. I can't really just say I have evidence, I have something solid to fixate upon when it comes to ranking FaZe correctly. There is no doubt in my mind that FaZe should be a top 5 team given their roster, but this isn't a tier list of hypothetical power. I need to see it to believe it, which I haven't seen enough of in the last month to convince me of anything better or anything worse than this. Elige has played himself into form, although we are still patiently waiting for Brokey to do the same. Peaking at Blast Bounty doesn't exactly fill me with confidence, and he's been forgettable in their few maps against top teams. The question of roster moves always lingers over FaZe, and Blast will be a prime opportunity to quash that question. If they disappoint, I'll be suggesting multiple brutal cuts. If they succeed, we need not talk about it until after Austin. We've seen honeymoons before, and though I'm starting to suspect that maybe MOUZ have found something that just works about this combination of players, I still think we're going to see this honeymoon come to an end. It may not be in quite as brutal a fashion as we've seen other teams had their honeymoon periods decimated, but I do think they are going to fall off a little bit from this seemingly top 4 level they've been showing. Simplifying the game plan has served them quite well. They have gone up tempo in a lot of places, but even when they are playing later pops, earlier pops, doesn't matter what it is, it's all about the trading and playing off each other perfectly in this tempest of their own creation. Roland's actually had some impressive calls in terms of the mid rounds, knowing exactly when to change the tempo, but also when to accelerate. It's been a surprisingly good start to his IGL tenure, and it's part of what makes me believe this won't be such a devastating end to their honeymoon. Porgy has looked particularly inspired in this run, being in the right place every time on the T side to find frags with an AK, a rarity in his career. But unfortunately, this run does smell a little bit of Bernie Madoff. There's no planet where I believe Torji is now a star on the rifle, driving MOUZ to wins over teams like Spirit, while Spinks sits back and watches. We'll see what happens next, though my projection isn't quite as generous as what this EPL run would imply. It's still far more generous than I thought I would be coming into this. Right, it's been a while since we've seen Eternal Fire ride their playstyle through an actual series win against a Power 10 team. Of course, they did play Spirit close at Pro League, but that's not really the same thing. I do have genuine concerns about the calling on this team, and their ability to be diverse in their style and approaches. It feels like Eternal Fire struggle to play assertive CT sides on the majority of maps, relying heavily on their crossfires and synergy insights, rather than presenting a variety of problems to the T side in map control. A very obvious example of this, just watch the difference between them playing CT side Mirage against Spirit, and then Spirit playing CT side Mirage against them. There are far more ideas on Spirit on how to get Donk involved in opening exchanges, how to get the team supporting him, and then how to progress into the late round. For Eternal Fire, it's very simply rotate around, avoid challenging too much in the middle, even though you do have a variety of players who could be in that fight and could change the look. They'd rather sit back and just play off their bomb site crossfires. Now they still sit here at number 5 because despite their weaknesses, on any given day they can take a best of 3 over the majority of the top 5. I won't hear otherwise. They have done it before and they probably will do it again. It just won't occur regularly enough to push them any higher, but it will keep them from losing relevance as long as I still see that spark, that flame, eternally burning some may say, of firepower in their barrels. Before we get into the top 4, who's our master beta for this event? And this is funny, this is going to actually be lucky. His trade kill stats are pretty crazy, and when you watch him play and you watch 3D Max in general, you realize he doesn't actually do a whole lot else. He's very much a hard trader. He's maybe throwing the occasional nade to get his entry out, but otherwise he is playing off of them, trying to trade their death, and without that I think he'd literally be on 0.4 KPR. I think that's how much the trade kills contribute to his fragging numbers. He's our master beta for this edition. Look at who's top 4. Yes, Mongols. They've been fantastic since returning to the scene, though I have some questions about the games they win. In EPL Studio, they did look amazing, but I have more faith in at least one team ahead of them who they actually managed to upset to be relied upon on the big stages. Senzu has been fragging out at Pro League, but having Mazinho and Techno 4K as backup riflers essentially leaves Blitz with enough firepower to win a small war. When all 3 young riflers perform like they did at EPL, only Vitality seemed up to the task of matching them. 910 has been a concern at times, but he's a consistent late round presence this year. I'm still waiting for a playoff performance that will canonize him as one of the very best AWPers we have in the scene, although perhaps Austin is where that destiny awaits to be fulfilled. Now the one weakness you could argue Mongols have is their trading. They had the lowest traded death percentage in all of ESL Pro League, including teams with far inferior win rates. But the reason this often ends up being is because of the way they set themselves up. Quite split, quite far apart, with a lot of players able to make little injunctions, little moves forward, and take heads-up fights and win them because they are so skilled. Potentially, I think, cleaning up some of these exchanges to try and increase the number of trade fags, simplify certain areas of the game plan, could also help them out in the long run. For now, they are essentially a living armory, a number of weapons wandering around the map, smashing heads in, and taking names. We've got another award. It's the Bro Just Turn Around award. And it goes to Muteris. With over 2 seconds flashed each round, he led Pro League. Man, this guy, just addicted to looking at flashbangs. Just like my teammates, who I've been playing with for years, know exactly the nades I'm going to use on every single pistol round on every map, and yet still complain that they got flashed. Bro, turn the fuck around. Muteris, please, do yourself a favour. Now, Na'Vi did not exactly shower themselves in glory here, going out in quarterfinals at EPL, but hey, let's just chalk it up to another one of those Na'Vi flukes, happens to everyone. They're still incredibly well drilled and, well called on Mirage, putting most teams to shame on that map. No, correction, all teams to shame, but Mongols showed you the brutality, the reality of Counter-Strike. If you can't hit your shots, you'll lose, no matter how smart you play. Imma, Wonderful, and Bit have struggled to maintain a respectable level against the best teams, with Bit being the one I really want to see the most from. This was the case for the first half of last year, and for now, just like then, JL Miracles remain the only way for them to succeed in those big matches. Now, here come the comments telling me that, hey, secretly, Na'Vi have this elite rifle core, an elite AWPer, the best IGL, and the best coach to boot, yet can't do better than a top 8 finish here. I personally don't want to hear it. I'm not interested. I still think this team is a couple roster moves away from, having the chance to recapture the glory of an event of the caliber of a major. Right before we get to the top 2, we have our final award. It's the Force by Abusers. Its vitality, 46.7%. Round 2 break percentage, win rate, whatever you want to call it. My lord, were they annoying on that second round, and they were force buying on both sides. Meta be damned. I think it's actually quite telling of how much belief you have in your overall roster if you're willing to round 2 force buy after a pistol loss on CT side. And some teams have earned that confidence, other teams have not. Vitality have proved they certainly have. They have been outstanding all year, really, as being a threat on every single round, with different players scouting, players on pistols. They're just a skilled, deep lineup, but man, this event, it really came to the fore. That's a ridiculous win rate in terms of round 2 forces. We'll see if they can maintain that. Team Spirit are in a bit of a weird spot. Top 4 here and second at Katowice are results that most teams would kill for. Spirit, however, it feels like a massive disappointment. After the way last year ended, and coming into this year with some of the other teams in the scene needing to integrate new pieces to try and figure out how to best optimize them, how to come back up to form, Spirit had a great window here to just win everything and set themselves up as an era-defining roster. Instead, well, falling down to second this fast, it's been a bit of a shock. Donk hasn't missed a beat, and while Shiro has been able to get his numbers, Katowice and Pro League both ended a step too early. Again, we find ourselves scratching our heads, trying to figure out exactly what isn't right in Spirit. Is Chopper a good enough caller? Is Magix a good enough anchor? Is Zontix impactful enough? Are Shiro's numbers real? For me, it seems a combination of factors. Shiro does look a little timid and risk-averse against stronger opposition, leaving Donk as the only playmaker consistently hitting his shots. He preserves a good rating, but the fragging isn't there. Magix can't seem to consistently deliver the way he did in Shanghai. Surprise, surprise. And to be honest, it's a bit too much to expect of him given his roles. Now, the final part of this is that Zontix hasn't really proven me wrong in terms of me not really believing in him as a highly impactful star rifler, so the search for a second star on this roster actually just keeps going on. As much as Shiro should be in that void, it does feel like they need someone else who's able to, on the rifles, bring the heat, and no one can. At number 1, surprise surprise, it's Vitality. Well-rounded, strong leadership, and a monster superstar. They have everything it takes to be a number 1 team. Ever since their defeat at Blast Bounty, I don't think they've lost a series. They took the number 1 spot from Spirit after Katowice, and now have held on to it, winning an EPL in convincing fashion. Rops has been fantastic, proving his value and finding incredibly impactful rounds time and time again. He doesn't contribute a large number of openers, but when he does, they're decisive. FlameZ was the other big question mark. Could he step up to the plate and be a star rifler in the CT spots that were opened up to him post-Spinks? Initially, it didn't seem so, though now it's looking like the youngster has truly found his form. He's delivering CT firepower and still acting as a powerful entry on the T side. We can't talk about Vitality without talking about ZywOo. He's been on top form, doing everything a star AWPer should do in CS. Opening, trading, closing, and even being an absolute demon on pistols. All the stars are fragging, whilst Apex is actually calling the most confident and unpredictable CS of any top IGL. Plus, he's talking a lot of quality shit talk, which is a crucial part of winning studio lands. Mezzy has also been a valuable fragger, putting up fragging numbers, well, not just comparable, but better than Perfecto from the Dream Team Na'Vi, that sort of original simple electronic bit roster. He's out-fragging him, despite some people's initial confusion. Mezzy has actually been a very valuable pack rifler, entry work, trader work. He's also having his occasional iconic outbursts from his anchor spots, which, to be honest, aren't entirely necessary given how well the team are playing, but just make them even more imposing and even more domineering over the scene over the last 2 months. Vitality head into Blast Open Lisbon as favourites, and I know a couple of games will have been played by the time this is released, but still, I do want to make a not-so-bold prediction that I have them winning this event. If they don't, the list of teams who I think will beat them is relatively limited. I think Spirit could give them a really good game in the playoffs should they have a second player step up. I still think that Mongols and Eternal Fire have about the same sort of win condition against them. If all the players are popping off and they're able to go and just take fights and simplify the game down. It's, again, a question of simplification. If you allow Vitality to really manipulate, maneuver, and outthink you, you're probably not going to win. But if you can just go out there, bang heads, play some deathmatch with them, you might have a strong chance. I'm Kingt, that's been the Power 10. Vitality remain on top. But alright, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment to me your thoughts on these placements. Let me know if you think I should bring back some of the Power 10 positional play rankings in terms of who's the best riflers, AWPers, all that sort of stuff. I did cut it in favour of saving myself the headache of having to edit all that, but you never know. If I find a good way of doing it, or an editor, we might bring it back. Alright, so if you want to see more content, remember that members get access to bonus content as well as the right to vote and other things. Yeah, most recently an M2 with Semler has been released. But yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.